Welcome to Dave's Faves, a series where I give my honest thoughts on video games that I think are top notch, despite their lack of whippers. And today, I'll be taking you back in time. Back to a time when feudal lords ruled with an iron fist, when men from the sea threatened to drink from your skull, and from when it was almost always harvesting season. Welcome to the lands of Calradia. It's just like real feudal Europe, but even more fucked up. Mount & Blade Warband is a standalone expansion to the original Mount & Blade, released by TaleWorlds ENTERTAINMENT and published by my favourite overpriced DLC peddlers, Paradox Interactive. Though as of now, they've returned the publishing back to TaleWorlds. It's a medieval sandbox RPG with a world split between 6 different factions that just want to rule the goddamn thing, and is also littered with bandits and mercenaries just trying to make a quick dinar or two. There's no real goal, there's no real narrative, you're set loose on this godforsaken world and it's up to you what you want to do next. You can side with one of the factions, hire yourself out as a sellsword, or take holdings for yourself and create a new kingdom. Freedom and replayability are two of Mount & Blade's most appealing aspects, and coupled with its very affordable price, it's a pretty common staple for your average Steam library. I've spent plenty of time in Mount & Blade trying to hack, slash, and siege my way to the top, and there's plenty of reasons as to why I've enjoyed myself so much doing so. The gameplay. The gameplay. Fuck yeah, the gameplay. The best thing about Mount & Blade Warband is just setting out into the world and getting shit done. There's no dumbass storyline you have to follow, no map limitations, no binding restrictions. You're set to go out and do as you please. Obviously you're initially set back a little due to the limitations of your skill and character stats, but once you start leveling up, gaining renown, and just tearing shit up, the crazy warfare and politics really start to kick in. The most enjoyable part of the game isn't even so much the actual fighting, but the context for the fighting. You can help a faction conquer the map or carve your own kingdom for yourself, all the while forming relationships and interacting with the many lords around the place. That being said, the combat itself is still hugely entertaining and satisfying. Being up on your horse just swinging shit around in a crowded group of enemies is honestly one of the most satisfying things you can do in any video game. And when you connect, it's just bam, 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 bam. You're not just killing these guys, you're slaughtering them. And that might make me a psychopath, but it's still a lot of goddamn fun. Probably the most exciting combat is in the sieges. Unfortunately, there isn't really any siege equipment other than ladders and siege towers, and your own allies have a bit of a bad habit of pushing you off of those, but they're still lots of fun. Hopefully Bannerlord sieges are even better, and from what they've shown us so far, they look like they'll be incredibly fun. But we'll have to wait and see, I guess. The world of Calradia also depends on its own virtual economy. Prices of certain goods will go up and down depending on supply and demand, which all just adds to the depth and replayability of this game. The game has a level up system as well as different attributes that you can specialize in. Strength, agility, intelligence, and charisma, which have their respective perks and affect the level caps of different skills. There is so much customization available for your character. Coupled with the backstory you generate for your hero at the start, every time you play it can be a totally different playstyle and experience. There's plenty of different weapons you can specialize in and ways you can tackle combat. With different battle terrains and with the ability to command your troops into formations, you have the freedom to go about your work in a number of different ways. Units can either be straight killed in combat, or just knocked unconscious, meaning that they will be good to fight again later on if their side wins, or can be captured as prisoners if their side loses. Lords and heroes can only be knocked out and not killed, and as annoying as that is sometimes, it prevents the game from breaking. Units taken as prisoners can then be sold to ransom brokers or eventually recruited, and lords taken prisoner will eventually be ransomed back by their faction for a handsome sum. Towards the end of the game it can get rather grindy, particularly when you're hitting the renown cap and it's hard to maintain enough renown to keep your party size, but I guess it's also a way to prevent you from being too overpowered. In general, the game can at times feel a little repetitive, especially when you're fighting huge battles with a couple of hundred combatants that actually have to be fought over like 5 battles because of the game's limitations. There also isn't a huge amount of variation in some other aspects of the game, particularly in the little side quests and tasks you can do for lords and villages. There's really only a handful of them, and they all just feel a bit like a chore. But in the end, it's an RPG, so a little bit of grindiness is to be expected. I would reiterate that the most satisfying part is the context for all of your endeavours, at least in my humbly unbiased opinion. The fact that it's a loosely historical game appeals to me as a history fanboy, so it earns some extra Davo points in that regard. Obviously, it's not in a historical setting, just in case you weren't aware that Calradia didn't actually exist, but it's more or less medieval Europe with factions that are based off historical nations and cultures of that period. Other than the little tutorial mission at the start, which is skippable anyway, I very much like that Mount & Blade doesn't try and make you follow a storyline or specific path. It's a true sandbox in that what occurs can be completely different to what happened last time you played, and you're not on some fixed path to destiny. You can go about it however the hell you want. Did you see that, Starbound? It's a sandbox game without a horrible overarching storyline that impacts your freedom in gameplay. You could learn a thing or two from it. The gameplay mechanics are pretty straightforward for the most part, most prevalently the combat. You swing or block in one of 4 directions, up, left, down or right, and your hero will swing or parry with their weapon respectively. Obviously there are ranged weapons as well, like bows and crossbows, which are pretty self-explanatory. Hit enemy with weapon and he dies. Hit enemy with weapon at speed and he dies harder. You get the gist of it? The learning curve is more present in the diplomacy and the relationships you build between different lords and factions. It's pretty easy to stuff things up the first time you jump into the game, and the way the vassalship and lordship works can be confusing to people unfamiliar with the terms or the game. But once you get past that learning curve, it becomes a lot easier to make your way in the world. And it's not a brick wall, you can get past it pretty easily just by playing the game a bit or browsing the wiki for a while. The visuals of Mount & Blade are... Oh, Jesus. The game looks pretty bad. I mean, it's old. It's from 2010, so it's fair to say that it can't exactly compete with modern standards like, Roblox. But even then, for a 2010 release, it doesn't look all that nice. The menus and UI in general are dated and a little unintuitive. The text that pops up in the bottom corner when an event happens also has a tendency to get in the way of the UI as well. The overall animation quality is pretty jarring and there's not a whole lot of variation. Pretty much every single unit uses the same running and attacking animations. That being said, I think it almost adds to the charm of this game. Every time you go into a dialogue with someone and you see their horrendous mug and that idle animation that's just exactly the same for every single NPC in the game, it's good stuff. It almost falls into that Oblivion category. The weird but kind of funny, goofy category where you don't really mind that everyone looks a little ridiculous. In terms of the sound, most of it is just the really loud sound that happens when you get hit by a projectile, or the sound of men screaming either in pain or as they march towards their death. When it comes down to it, I don't think that the dated aesthetics of the game really ruin the experience for me. Obviously, if you'd give me a Mount & Blade with beautiful modern graphics, I'd take it in a heartbeat, but that's hopefully what Bannerlord will give us. But it's TaleWorlds, so I wouldn't keep my hopes up too much. Overall, Mount & Blade Warband is simply one of the best video game experiences I have ever had. Yeah, it's got its issues, yeah the graphics have aged about as well as a kebab left on the bench after a somewhat regretful night out, but the game itself is just a whole lot of fun. And sure, it's got no Whoopers or Whooper related media in it, which is a bit of a downer. But you know, there's the winged helmets, and they're kinda close. I'll be the first to admit that this game has its flaws. It's not a perfect game by any means, but does such a thing really exist? In my books, the goods far outweigh the bads, and when you really get into it, the gameplay in Mount & Blade is addicting. And it's the outcomes of your gameplay that are the most satisfying. Being able to pave your way up through the ranks from a commoner to a powerful lord is the best part of this game, and what keeps me coming back to it. There's so many different ways you can tackle the chaotic world around you, and so many different ways you can set up your character to do so. The game is just infinitely replayable. The fact that every time I jump back into this game it feels fresh and exciting despite its age is why this is one of my favourite games of all time, and certainly one of the best acquisitions to my Steam library. And I'd encourage you to buy it if you don't already own it, like any decent human being with a Steam account should. Even if it's just for the meme, it's a cost-effective game that will be more than worth it in potential playtime. So thanks for watching this installment into Dave's Faves. Hope you enjoyed this review, and there'll be more coming in the future. If you want to see more of these reviews, make sure to click the subscribe button below, my good man. And be sure to ring that MF bell too. And if we hit the old 2,000 subs, I'll give you the next installment of Dave's Faves.